Well, hi everybody. Good morning. I'm truly thrilled to be here. Thanks to Wally and the entire team at GA for the opportunity to speak with you. It's really fun to engage with industry and to really, I learned so much in every conversation that I've had with you. And thanks to especially all of you who came to dinner last night that Ned and I cooked. And especially I want to thank Ned and the Four Seasons for hosting us today. If I may also make one, oh good, I'm not still up on the screen there. One addition to the resume there is after I left restaurants, I'm no longer a chef. I consider myself a recovering chef. I'm now the director of the Health and Sustainable Food Program at Harvard University's School of Public Health. And that's a lot of, I just wanted to mention that because that's somewhat of the direction that I want to be taking this talk today. Really talking about the trajectory of where the sustainability conversation is heading. Because I think that as we begin to focus on education, as you think about how do we begin to advertise and really credit ourselves with our own story from the aquaculture industry, I'm going to try and offer you sort of a glimpse into where I see the sustainability dialogue moving within the next 5 to 10 years. Start off with a little story about myself. When I was a young boy, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. during the era of Marion Barry, potentially only outdone by Rob Ford as the world's greatest mayor. My parents had this really great idea during the summers to get me out of D.C., and I spent a lot of time down the Patuxent River, tributary of the Chesapeake. And there I spent my entire day in the quest for food. Oysters, blue crabs, rockfish, bluefish, spots, perch, porgy, croaker, you name it. This was my bounty. This was my baseline. This is what I came to understand the world to provide, and that's what I thought the world was. Now, when I became a chef several years on, I wanted to explore my own past. A menu is a very personal narrative. It's what I want to share of my experiences with you. So I got on the phone with my purveyor and I said, hey, send me bluefish, blue crabs, oysters. I want rockfish. This is really going to be great. I was really excited. And the guy on the other end of the line literally said to me word for word, kid, what are you talking about? We ate all of those. What else do you want? And I realized right then and there, quite starkly, the guiding hand of natural selection in our world is quite firmly holding a fork. The way that we eat describes how this world is used. And I came to realize that that's one of the best news I've ever heard. If we can destroy ecosystems, if we can damage our bodies, make ourselves and communities sick by the choices we make for dinner, fabulous, folks. That means that we can heal and we can restore by those very same decisions. And so I really began to see this as, ourselves as chefs, as the industry, as the role of sort of the optimism, of the guard of the new generation. Now, as I began to learn more about sustainability, I really looked to environmental campaigns. NGOs, especially in the seafood world, were particularly great in engaging me and teaching me, really bringing me along and helping to understand how we impact ecosystems. But I began to realize that sometimes environmental campaigns can be acute, not because of their initial purpose, but rather in our consistent responsiveness to our actions, to consistently revisit the purpose of our initial goals. Two examples of this, recycling. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Legislated in municipalities everywhere. It is absolutely ingrained fundamentally into the minds and hearts of the next generations. They don't even think about doing anything else. But in the years since reduce, reuse, and recycle have become part of our cultural mantra, the amount of recyclable goods flowing into our marketplace has increased exponentially. Why? Because we as consumers got so busy reducing, reusing, and recycling that we allowed bananas to be wrapped in plastic wrap. Because we came to prefer convenience goods, to not consistently revisit the purpose of actually reducing the amount of recyclable goods. Another one, organics. Better for you, better for me, better for the workers for certain, better for the soil, better for the earth. Woohoo! Organics, right? I'm all for it. Everybody want to smoke an organic cigarette with me? How did that happen? Well, the problem is they're not flaws with the system. There's nothing wrong with organic. There's nothing wrong with recycling. Please support them. But rather, what's wrong is in the way that we use these campaigns almost to act as a confirmation bias, to allow us to continue on in the same behaviors. And sustainable seafood, in some ways, despite all of its great and wonderful intentions, has sometimes led to these same levels of acute thinking, these sort of externalities that it creates. A good example of this, I was at National Geographic at headquarters, and they're basically all 1,700 employees got together and signed a petition saying, we want to ban bottled water from being sold on campus. Well, okay, 1,700 people. I mean, Sodexo had no choice but to submit to this. Great, okay. They took bottled water off campus. Except they didn't. They took bottled water, but they sold Gatorade and orange juice and Coke and Pepsi, everything else in a bottle. And what do you think those are? Well, it's 90% water, folks, with 10% sugar. So what did we actually ban? The only healthful option on campus. Again, the purpose was noble. The purpose was morally correct. But there was an externality to this that we weren't quite expecting. Now, in sustainable seafood, I sort of experienced this myself. And this was really when I shifted from becoming you know what, aquaculturist? Everything you're doing is wrong. One of those chefs. That was me. Sorry. Redemption narratives are always so pleasant, aren't they? Fish to Fork, a website out of the UK that ranks restaurants on how they do on sustainability. 5 red forks, 5 green forks. I mean, it's a great program. It's a little bit of name and shame. And here I was, sustainability champion, proud of what I was doing, trying to push the envelope. And I got 4 forks. Why didn't I get 5? Well, it's because I was serving an Arctic char that was farm raised in West Virginia by Blue Ridge Aquaculture. And it had a feed conversion ratio that didn't quite fit the ultra green list. And so I got docked for that. And I began to realize that right there, the environmental campaign, the biological metric that governed that sustainability ranking didn't quite get the full picture. Now, sure, Blue Ridge Aquaculture was not performing loaves and fishes miracles, but they certainly were performing anchovies and jobs miracles. They were creating dozens of jobs in one of the poorest areas of our country. Isn't that worth supporting? And I think now that the trajectory of sustainability is that this strictly biological measure, which is vitally necessary and good, but I think the primacy of just that biology is beginning to wane. Because in some ways, that is a do no harm approach. And a do no harm doesn't win hearts and minds. It doesn't create positive messages. I mean, sustainability it's the least sexy idea I've ever heard of. It's terrible. Just think about it. If you sacrifice, if you make all of these investments, if you radically alter the way that you do business, if you are at the cutting edge and just bleed your heart into your business and make all of these changes, guess what happens? Everything stays the same. If cod fishermen make incredible sacrifices, cut quotas, cut mortgages, consolidate quotas, do all of these things that have led to really real hardships on community, guess what happens? Cod is still on sale at Stop & Shop. Nothing is gained. There's no real presence of the positive. And this is partly because, as an industry, we have not been able to sell the positives. Just as health is not defined by the absence of disease, sustainability cannot be defined by the absence of negative impact. Now, our purpose in sustainability is not just to minimize our impact on environments. Our purpose is equally to maximize the impact that environments have on us. Because it is my belief, through my years of exploration, through National Geographic and my time at Harvard, really seeing the impacts that you have on public health, that our purpose is to sustain enduring, thriving human communities. That is what sustainability, I believe, will mean in 5 to 10 years. So how does this relate to aquaculture? How does this relate to what you do? Well, it's the story that you tell. Moreover, it's the story that you choose to sell. I mean, in the US, and I'll talk about this because this is my general fluency, and I hope that this relates to the global audience we have here. In the US, we are simply not thriving. Our diet is killing us. Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately, desperately need to eat more seafood. The number one cause of death in this country is heart disease. What is the very best preventative we have for that? Seafood, folks. Seafood and maybe a lack of red meat as well in our diet. Now, I'm not anti-beef, but I am pro-diversity, and we are eating anything but a diverse diet. We desperately need to incorporate more seafood into our diets. Not only for the positive benefits, but we also need to replace some of that red meat. I mean, if you look at the threats that are truly existential to our oceans, acidification is right there at the top of the list. Well, guess what? 35% of our greenhouse gas emissions in this country come from meat production. With land use alterations, you know, these proteins have incredible water usage, they have incredible feed conversion ratios far above salmon, far above most any aquaculture. I mean, these are important things to measure, to look at what we do in the context of our choices. To look at salmon, to look at tilapia, to look at our farm products, not as seafood, but as part of the protein conversation. What choices are we making, and what are the metrics? What are the context of the decisions that we are making? Well, if the context is environment, that salmon looks pretty good. If the context is health, wow, that salmon looks really good. So this is the coming dialogue. In 2015, there was a push to get the USDA food recommendations to include, for the first time, sustainability. Now, it got shot down because there are incredibly powerful lobbies, beef, that don't want this information out there. And I don't blame them. I mean, it doesn't really put them in a great light. But when Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack made his announcement that they wouldn't be part of this, it was a pretty cagey answer that made me believe that by 2020, you will be seeing these environmental metrics. And guess what those metrics will be? Greenhouse gas emissions, water use, land use alterations. How does aquaculture stand up at those? Hey, y'all are looking pretty good to me. Now, I think that oftentimes sustainability campaigns have sometimes had that negative externality of actually deterring us from looking at the healthier option in the store. Now, it is just flat out more dangerous to not eat seafood than it is to eat any seafood. We desperately, desperately need to be doing this. So we've actually pushed people towards the least healthy options, because when they get confused at the seafood counter, where do they go? Ground beef, folks. Well, in America, they go to chicken mostly, but still, that has a lot of the same impact issues. And so we've not only pushed them towards some of the less environmentally friendly options, we've pushed them definitely away from the healthiest options. 14.5 pounds per person per year of seafood eaten in this country. 172 pounds of beef, pork, chicken, and lamb. That needs to shift desperately. I mean, this is a national security issue. This is a health issue. I mean, there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot of thriving human communities that we can be working a lot better towards sustaining. Now, we need to sell the story of eating more salmon, eating more fish, eating more seafood constantly in our diets. And there are wonderful people, S&P, NFI, who are doing incredible work to advertise this story. But there is so much more to this story. There's so much more to what you do. And this is the coming conversation about sustainability. And this is what I hope you take away from at least my conversation today, and what Ned is going to join me to speak about later. In America, my colleague, Dr. Cynthia Jones, a colleague of mine at the Institute of Medicine Roundtable on ecosystem impacts, ecosystem services. She did a study in which she said she figured out that if we were to eat every single ounce of seafood wild caught in this country, including menhaden, eulachon, herring, you name it, yielded out for 55% yield, thereabouts. If we were to eat every single piece of wild caught seafood, we only produce 60% of what our government currently advises we eat. Ho, folks. And we're going to be advised to eat even more? Y'all fit into this equation. We desperately need more aquaculture. Globally, we desperately need more aquaculture in this country. I mean, we're not going to find more fresh water. Look at California. We're not going to find more land. 36% of arable land right now is used for farming globally. We can't just slash and burn more rainforests. We got to start building kelp forests. This is just the plain truth of it. But your story is, it's a story of jobs. It's a story of food security. It's a story of working waterfronts. It's a story of communities. In my community, in Maine, where I live on the jagged, ragged, beautiful coast, I was talking to a young man north, up in Machias, and he said his dad was really sick, and he was having a real hard time trying to figure out how to take care of his dad until Cook Aquaculture opened up a salmon processing facility. And all of a sudden, he had a job. And in a rural community, he finally had opportunity to stay put, to take care of his own heritage, his own people, to participate in his own community. Damn, folks. That is a good story. That is a really good story. And that's a lot of what you represent. And I urge you to own that story. Now, in America, we've got two really great food movements, Farm Aid being probably the chief amongst them. Now, Farm Aid and sustainable seafood largely happened around the same time. And Farm Aid says this: the small American family farm is a vital and necessary fundamental aspect of our cultural fabric. Therefore, we must do all that we can to save the farmer. Sustainable seafood. The oceans are in trouble. We must do everything that we can to save the oceans. Noble cause. But what got left out? Our neighbors. Those stories. For too long, we've venerated farmers, as they rightfully should be. But we've vilified fishermen, and we have certainly vilified everyone in this room. Now think about our national songs in this country. The amber waves of grain, the fruited plain, but not zero mention of the cod or the cod fishermen upon whose backs this country was in no small part founded. We have not venerated you as a community for what you are. And it is this otherness that has separated seafood, that has separated aquaculture from the conversation of good food. Now, seafood only represents 2% of the global food economy. I understand why this is somewhat of a niche topic when it comes to these large, huge global conversations. Aquaculture, therefore, represents maybe 1%. Despite being a huge industry, well, I understand why that story hasn't been there, why that otherness has been allowed to persist. But as a farmer is so noble, so are you. You do the same thing. Your story is one of people, just as it is on farms. And I think you, as an industry, need to make rightful claim to the halo that has long hung over the heads of agrarians. Because what do? Sure, you manage disease, you farm fish. Yeah, folks, more importantly, you feed people. And you deserve a lot of credit for that. The biology of sustainability is incredibly important. And you've got a lot of challenges yet facing you. You have a lot of work to do. But I'm not going to sit here and demonize you, because the biography of sustainability is becoming equally important. And in that situation, in that context, you all look like heroes. And you need to begin to see yourselves as such. This is the marketplace that you're moving into. This is what white tablecloth chefs are looking to. The people who are developing trends, setting the tone of conversation. We're no longer looking at strictly biological metrics. We are looking at biographical sustainability. So tell the world what you do. Tell the world that you produce food, that you feed people. Claim credit for this. And to the NGOs in the room, I also ask that you begin to create space. You allow for this industry to begin to rightfully claim some of this story. For you to begin to see some of these larger contexts of the biographical aspects of sustainability. And of course, this is happening with labor practices, with GAA. I mean, all of the great things that ASC and GAA and BAP and that are beginning to look at in terms of sustainability. But again, this is looking at sort of a do no harm approach, looking at diminishing our footprint. But how do we maximize our handprint? How do we begin to really sell the story of the good on this earth that we are creating? So please, NGOs, give credit. Industry, rightfully claim credit. Because ultimately, the three great S's of public health, the three great S's of enduring, thriving human communities, as relates to my work, as relates to the coming conversation, don't smoke, wear your seatbelt, and eat seafood. Thanks, folks.